on this program. It's kind of become a thing.
I like dancing.
Oh, welcome back, my friends, to another episode of The Shadow Side with Safrianna. We started this new program and then I had to put it on hiatus because I needed to do a lot of soul searching and figuring out what the heck this program was really about and the kinds of conversations I wanted to have and all of that juiciness. So I am so delighted to be back with my dear friend, Dr. Melissa Bird, who is just an absolute powerhouse of a being to talk about navigating the unknown today. So thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Melissa. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. And I'm even more excited that the neighbors decided to just start blowing their leaves right now. I'm like, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so distracting. I am Dr. Melissa Bird. I am a descendant of the Shivwits Band of Paiutes in what is now known as Utah and Arizona. I am a lay preacher with the Episcopal Church, and I am also a healer, and I do divination and tarot. And I live in Corvallis, Oregon, with one husband, 3 children, one of whom just moved back in, like
Always complicated.
took over the trailer, so now we can't go camping. 3 children, teenagers, 2 dogs, and 1 3-legged cat. And bless her heart. And I am I'm feeling spicy today.
I am delighted you're feeling spicy today because that is honestly as I sit with the Shadow Side program, I'm like, what is it about? And it is about being willing to talk about the hard shit and get into the core of what's really going on, into the shadows. So, just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I help visionary leaders step into their authenticity so that they can get out of their own way, so they can heckin' slay, I say, and make an iconic impact in their industries. So, I'm all about the disruptive leaders, the people who are doing things differently. I mean, when I met you, Dr. Bird, I was like blown away by the intersections of all these things you do and the people you serve and just everything. So, we wanted to talk about navigating the unknown today. And as you mentioned, you do tarot and divination and all kinds of things. And I was very lucky to get to go to a call that you hosted the other day where we were doing readings, and your reading was so spot on, and it was perfect advice for navigating the unknown ahead for me. So I love that we're getting to have this conversation and turn it over to the collective today as we enter. Right before we went live, we were talking about how energetically it feels like we're slogging through mud right now. So I'd love to hear your perspective on this and your take on right here, right now, as we're navigating this unknown. What's coming up for you?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you for being at the reading. It was awesome. And also, the more I do tarot, the more I realize that the cards just do not lie. And I have really, especially recently, like when I'm doing tarot readings, I'm like, oh, that you're not gonna want to hear this. Oh. So the idea of navigating the unknown has really it evolved. So when I first started working with people back in 2017, so I started my business and I created this thing called Rebel School. And I created Rebel School because someone had a divine download. A friend of mine called me while I was in like a lift on the way to the airport from flying down to Southern California to teach a class from Oregon. And I was flying. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I knew I didn't want to be in academia anymore because it was painful. And I wasn't making enough money because note to everybody, adjunct professors make $3 an hour. So you can't feed a family of 5 on that.
No.
And yeah. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so my friend Susie gets this divine download, calls me and says, I need you to write this down. And so I'm like in the back of this on the freeway in California writing all these notes. And she's like, you need to write a book and here's what needs to be in it and blah, 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 blah. So Rebel School was born. And what I learned from that very first thing I did was there's so much here to uncover. Because what I was talking about was how to to heal your shame and wounding, to really be able to step into who you are as an intuitive being. Well, what happened was that I had to add another part to that. Like, once you've healed the shame and wounding, the next piece is to really learn how to tap into your intuition to make a difference in your communities. And this was post 2016 election. So many things were happening. And one of the things I really wanted to help people do was really make a difference in their communities. But what I kept running up against was I was working with all of these women in particular who were coming to me who had just experienced horrific um, discrimination from evangelical Christianity in particular. I did have a couple of conservative Jewish women actually who were like really painfully harmed by religion. And what I started to know, I started to notice this pattern that all these people were coming to work with me who were also highly intuitive, magical witches and and other really highly intuitive people, mostly mystics and witches and folks who like were really tapped into the collective but didn't know how to navigate all that pain from how they still believed in Jesus too. So that was the other thing that was really complicated for them was they were like, well, can I do this or that? And
Right.
at the same time, I was going through that myself, like, because I love Jesus and I love the Virgin Mary and I love God. And also I'm magic as shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm really powerful. And I'm like, well, can I do this? Like, is it okay? Is it acceptable? Am I going to get in trouble? Like, still to this day, sometimes I'm like, am I going to get in trouble for this?
It's
Like, is
real.
someone going to get mad at me? And nobody's going to get mad at me. It's okay. I'm going to be fine. But that unknown, the idea that if I keep stepping into my power and I keep evolving into my spiritual growth and I keep expanding into where I'm being called, I have no idea what's going to happen. And that is simultaneously terrifying and also that's where I have found the divine. That's where I have found the most spiritual growth is when I'm walking into something with no idea what the outcome's going to be. And so many of us, particularly over the last 4 years, are really being pushed into this space where we have no idea what the outcome is going to be. And in our society, we've been trained that you have to know before you make a choice. And that's not true. And so Rebel School turned into the Art of the Graceful Revolution, where I really started teaching about once we've healed the shame and stepped into our intuitive powers, how do we engage in our communities, in our lives, with our families and our friends? How do we engage in that from that place of unknowing, which
Yeah.
people don't love?
No, they don't. I would say that, like every client I've ever worked with, that's one of their biggest fears is not knowing. And I've gotten so much bad advice in the past of like, no, you can't make a choice until you know 100% certain how it's going to go. And like, I love that you said in the last 4 years because that there's been this invitation to step into the unknown more because it's been preparing us for the chapter we're in right now, which is a big unknown for many of us. But literally, it was just a little over it would have been, it'll be 2 years in 2 months that I knew I needed to literally quit my therapy career
Mm.
with no backup plan, with no money in savings, with like, I don't know what I'm doing. But the download was so clear. And then I'm getting told by spirit, like, now you've got to write your books, these radically queer, polyamorous, inclusive novels, right? And I'm like, right? Because when we look collectively, it doesn't look like the right time to be making these big choices. But so many of us are being pushed to make these big leaps.
Yeah.
And I see it's like collective awakening, and it's scary as hell.
Well, and you know what's scary as hell is a lot of people don't want to pay us for what we're doing. And I've had this conversation with so many people who do the work that we do in the last like since Thursday, like the last 4 days, 5 days. Like so many people like are really wondering how am I going to make a living? And actually, this goes back to something you said about getting all that bad advice about knowing what's going to happen before you take the leap.
Mhm.
I just was thinking before I posted my love note on Friday. So I have I do a weekly love note on my Substack. And before I posted my love note on Friday, I was really wrestling with telling the truth about what was going on in my life, because I've gotten all this really bad advice from life coaches and all this stuff that you don't talk about your struggles. Everybody wants you to be happy clappy.
Yep.
They don't want you to talk about what's wrong. And I'm
Nope.
like, but something's wrong right now. And what's wrong is I was I was really struggling last week. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen with my business or paying my car payments, or feeding my kids, because food is flipping expensive, y'all.
So expensive.
Teenagers eat so much food. And so, but I was honest and truthful. And what came out of that was a whole lot of the universe saying, okay, here, let me just hand you all this. But one of the conversations I was having was with a woman who's a shaman, and she's been running her business for over 20 years. And even she's struggling right now.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest parts of the conversation was we were talking about how spirit guides come in a couple different forms. One of them is people who've passed on, and, our ancestors who are here to help and guide us. But she was talking about the big, powerful spirit guides who've never taken a bodily form, who, are also here to guide us, but they don't understand what it's like to live in the capitalist society that we live in. Like, they've never embodied that. And so we both at the same time were like, hello, we still have to survive. Like, we still have to live here. Like, so could you change your tradition? I know you want me to do these big, amazing, beautiful things, and write amazing books and do all this really beautiful healing work for the collective. And also, we have to get paid.
Yes.
So if you could orchestrate that, please, that would be great. And so I also think that when we do this big spiritual work and we listen to the download, we also have to remind spirit that we also require abundance in the form of money. And we can't be afraid to say that. And it's not like we're looking for the 8-figure launch or whatever the bullshit is that's going on, that narrative. I just I just want to take care of my family.
Yeah.
And for everybody who's listening to this, like, it's really, really important to pay people for the work that they are doing, including when we are doing very deep emotional, spiritual work.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I've been thinking about that. I'm navigating the unknown and looking forward to the future right now, and was looking at the way I do my work right now. And I do so much energetic and emotional work in between sessions, because that's part of how I work. I love doing that, being able to, like, get on a voice memo and be like, all right, breathe. I'm going to guide you through a practice right here, right now. We don't have to get on a call. Like, but that's so much invisible behind the scenes labor. And when we're doing this emotional and spiritual type of work, we have to take care of ourselves so well, or that energy literally can seep into our people. And if we're going to be ethical, we know we got to manage ourselves first.
Yeah.
And that means that our needs have to be taken care of. And this kind of soft skills work, or the invisible work, is not valued in this capitalistic patriarchal system that we currently exist in. And so we have to keep changing the narrative, and that doesn't happen when we're keeping quiet and we're not speaking up on the reality of living this human existence.
Yeah. And I think that I really want people to remember that we have to have physical human beings to guide us through this chaos, because this isn't just going to be the next 4 years. I actually said to someone said to me the other day, someone in England actually was like, well, we're just going to have a really rough next 4 years. And I was like, 4 years? This is like a 60, 70 year trajectory easily, because that started, by the way, in 2016. So this is not the downfall of the United States democracy. The crumbling of our democracy is not going to last for 4 years. It's going to last. The ramifications of what is happening are going to last for at least 60 or 70 years, if not longer. And I've been saying that from the beginning, and the Passionistas who are here can attest to that, right? Like, I'm like, buckle up, buttercup. Like, This
I've
is not just a 4-year deal. And
no.
and we have to be willing to just take the chaos one day at a time. And that's one of the things that I really love about being in a regular practice of navigating the unknown, and really just breathing into my body and going, okay, what's the next best thing?
Hmm.
I sometimes I don't like the answer, like, because the worker in me wants the next best thing to be to write the greatest email that's ever been written, and 3 bazillion people are going to read it and be so inspired they can't help but throw money at me and like tell everybody about my work and buy my book and do all the things, right? Like, that's where my brain goes. And usually the next best thing is color a picture or have a cup of tea, or like, like,
Breathe.
breathe, just take a breath. And I'm like, I don't understand.
Yeah. We're so prone to wanting action because again, that's the culture. That's the
Yeah.
system that we live in tells us to take action all the time
Mhm.
in every single way, right? And so we're uncoupling from the fact that or into the fact that we actually need that still time in order for the actual answers to come about how we navigate the unknown. And that's so uncomfortable for us. Part of what I teach people is the infinity symbol is the shadow and the light, and they intersect in the 4D, in the now. When we're aware of all the pleasant things and all the unpleasant things. And that's where we can take actual, like, we can actually plan, we can actually mobilize. But most of us try to circle this shadow side and we get stuck
Yeah.
trying to fix it
Yeah.
instead of understanding it's a part of this. And, I think about the collective right now. You said this is like a 60-year thing, and it started 60, 70 years, starting in 2016. I can't remember. I'll have to Google it, but like the Me Too movement, I feel like was a a start of a collective, like, we're looking at the shadows now, we're starting to call them out. Hey, and like that's what's happening right now is all of these collective shadows. Racism, sexism, transphobia, like it's all ugly in our face. And that's not going to heal in 4 years.
No.
It's going to take the whole collective working together over many decades to repair the fuckery that has unfolded over the past several thousand years, right? Like,
Well, and I think that's good. Like when I think about the health of our democracy, and I think about what's happening, and I think about connecting this to my own spiritual beliefs and my own ancestry, like, I want this democracy to be a thriving democracy. And also, this is a democracy that was built on white supremacy, genocide, and the ownership of other people. Like, like it's okay for us to be doing an analysis of how this can be better, how this can go beyond inclusivity, to start talking about how do we speak of the way laws are made, the way we function in the world. And and I think it's good for us to be going through this, right? Like, democracies fall apart every 3 or 400 years anyway, like we're due. Like, and also, you know, this is the really beautiful part of doing the work that I do in particular, but I think that we all do collectively. Like, we are here to help people navigate their grief, right? We are here to help people see that there is another way of thinking and being. And when we tap into our mind, our body, our spirit, like, I call them the 4 bodies, right? We have a physical body, an emotional body, a spiritual body, and a mental body. And when those 4 bodies come together and connect to the land, and connect to um and really ground in and anchor into Mother Earth, then what happens is we end up seeing where places where we can love ourselves more, so that we are more able to love other people, where we can be more compassionate towards ourselves so that we can be more compassionate towards other people. And and i and I think that, like, one of the things that I think is so beautiful about that is that when we do take action, then what happens is we're taking action from a really inspired, intuitive, intentional place. And when we take action from from this really inspired, intentional, intuitive place, then the clarity and the confidence that we build, which is that good old action leads to clarity leads to confidence cycle, is also based in our intuition and in intention and in taking these beautiful steps forward, not because we think we have to or we should, but because we really want to give ourselves the love and compassion so that the action, the clarity, and the confidence is built off intention and intuition and inspiration. Because I get really tired of taking action just because I think I have to. I would rather be really inspired in every single thing that I do so that as I move forward in the world, other people are also inspired from what it is that I am doing.
Yeah. And that's, walk that going back to actually sharing your struggle, walking the human example of what it looks like when we're embodied, when we are not letting the mental body run the show, right? Because that's most of us are so stuck up in that mental body and
Yes.
it's just running the show,
Yes.
grounding into the physical, feeling the feelings that are routing through us, through our body, through our mind, through the felt sense, and then connecting to that higher self. Like the alignment is where everything shifts. And alignment doesn't look like constant action because it looks like the infinity loop. It looks like action and rest and action and rest and
Mhm.
introspection and expression. So you're such an inspiration. Like you are such an inspiration in everything that you do. And that inspires other people to tune into themselves, to stop hustling and grinding and going all the time. So like the work that you're doing is so important and essential to teaching people a new way to navigate this stuff.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, thank you. And I think that, you've talked about rest a couple of times. I also want people to remember that we don't all rest the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I feel most meditative and calm when I'm listening to Metallica. And like, they're my favorite band. I love them. I check out when I listen to Metallica. Like, so for some of us, that internal spirit is not like getting quiet and being in a quiet and restful place. The ways I rest are not the traditional ways that we are taught to rest. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have to remember that each one of us finds peace in a different way. And sure, sometimes I just want a quiet room and I want my cup of tea and I want to read a good trashy book and that's how I'm going to rest. But sometimes I'm driving my Camaro at high speeds, screaming at the top of my lungs to Metallica. And like, I think we have to remember that we are also these really, when we fall into the things that drive us, when we allow ourselves to go, okay, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know I want to have a good time while I'm heading in that direction. I want to feel joyful. I want to engage in this life with joy. I've been reminding so many people lately, like people still had babies even in concentration camps. Like people still got married during World War II. While we were locked down during COVID, a lot of really magical, beautiful, joyful, amazing things took place.
Yeah.
When we are faced with sorrow, the only way we can know sorrow is through joy, because you don't get to you don't know happiness if you don't know sadness, and you don't know love if you don't know grief. And so if we acknowledge that we are grieving, loving, freaked out, joyful people, then we can allow for the experience of all of the feelings.
Yeah.
And we've got to really anchor into that. We are not meant to just be happy, clappy, everything's great all the time. And we are also not meant to be sad and anxious and despairing all the time.
Yes.
And we can find a way to play with all of those things. Like I love how you use the infinity sign. Like I kind of think of it as the waves, right? Like waves come in sets of 7. They go out, they come in, they go out, they come in. And as long as they are working in harmony with the moon, the waves will always go out and come in. And that is just We are made up of water. We
Mhm.
are the waves. We are going out and coming in. And sometimes it's rad. It's fucking amazeballs. And sometimes it sucks so bad. And that is the human experience. And like, I've really been thinking about, I don't know if you've been thinking about like this, what it's like to be a human being,
Oh yeah.
but we're just humans being.
Yep.
That's it. We're that's it, what we're doing.
Yeah. And so many of us have lost the core central tenet of humanity, which is this water. Water connecting all life. The water body is the emotional body. It's our feelings.
Yeah.
And when we're cutting ourselves down and saying, like, I'm only allowed to feel sad this much, that's also saying I'm only allowed to feel joy this much. And
Yes.
that's like if there's anything people could ever take away, it's like if you can let yourself feel the full expanse of both sides, that's what it does. It's both sides. And so if you're trying to cut yourself down to one, you really usually just end up stuck in the other, first of all. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, and living in the both and is so important because
Mhm.
if we think life is about either or, we're just falling right into white supremacist, patriarchal, misogynistic bullshit. That
Yeah.
life is not either or. That is a system that was put into place to literally conquer lands and people. We are meant to be in the messy both and. I actually have I want to share this really fun metaphor that came to me. It was like totally a download. It was, do you know the bumper cars at the fair?
Mhm.
Like, I hope everybody knows what the bumper cars are. So, like, you go to the bumper cars, and anytime you're waiting to get in line at the bumper cars, all of humanity is represented in that little circular area. You have the people that are like ramming into other people, and they're like, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to take you out, right? And then you got the one person over in the corner that's stuck in the spin and like cannot get unspun, right? And needs help desperately, but just keeps spinning over and over again. And then you've got the other person in the bumper car who's just like barely moving along and, oh, hey, how are you? It's so good to see you. And they're just moving around in the circle on the track. And then you've got the other person who goes and helps all the other people. So like they go and nudge the person who's in the spiral, and they go and nudge the person that's ramming into other people. And like, you've got the helper on the bumper cars, but basically that's what we're doing right now. Like, that is just like, we are just peopling.
Yeah.
And we are just running around in the bumper cars of life. And some of us are just tootling around, and others of us are really pissed off. And some of us are just off in a spin, and we really need help. And some of us are the helpers. And like, if we could just give ourselves a fucking break already
Mhm.
and just be people, like, could we just realize that our elected officials literally put on their pants one leg at a time? And some of them might be getting it wrong and putting one leg in two legs in one pant leg. Like they're just people, y'all. They're just people. They're just
No
people.
external savior, my friends.
But there is no external savior. Like, no one is coming to save us. Even Jesus isn't coming to save us. And I love Jesus. Like, he's not
Me
coming
me
here.
too, but
He's
not.
not. He's like, listen to my guidance. And I was just I think I just wrote about this on Monday, but like, Jesus was also like, what did I say? It was so good. I'm going to refer to my little note I
Do
wrote
it.
because it was just such a lovely um it was Jesus doing something against the norm is something Jesus did every day. Like, every day Jesus was like, huh, that's really interesting. I think I'm going to do the other thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm gonna try it different.
And if we're going to really like say we believe in Jesus, I'm talking to you, all my Christian friends who are really confused right now. Go against the norm. Try a different way. Perhaps maybe if we try to be, and I'm saying this, we have got to be more compassionate towards each other. I mean, like, if we could just realize that we are all in the spin, and some of us are hoping to help other people get out of the spin, then we could be more compassionate towards people who do not think like us, who do not act like us, who do not walk like us, who do not talk like us. We have got to start recognizing our shared humanity.
Yes.
Talk about walking in the unknown. Talk about navigating the chaos. Can you imagine what would happen if we actually looked at our enemy and we're like, "Huh, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, let me get curious here instead of
I
critical
never thought of
immediately.
it that way."
Yeah. And it's being in the mental health field for as long as I was and in the teaching profession, I have been around a lot of people, around a lot of communication-based stuff. We don't even know how to communicate in our families as a collective. There is the micro and macro. It plays out in our households. This trend of generational trauma, not communicating about the real issues, spiritual bypassing, emotional bypassing, turning a blind eye in the wrong way. And all of that, right? It's like we've got a lot of work to do. This is not solving in 4 years because we have to learn to communicate interpersonally, one-on-one with the people that we supposedly like before we have a chance as a collective of going out and offering the olive branch and having meaningful conversations. Not to say that there aren't people who are doing that work. Like I see you and I and many people in our field doing that kind of work, right? Trying to bridge the gaps, trying to create common understanding and all of that. But the collective as a whole, not there yet. So how do we help them get there?
Well, I think the first way we help each other is that we acknowledge that we are individual people living in a collective. So this idea of individualism and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and all this other horseshit, which just perpetuates a bunch of other horseshit.
Yeah.
Like that's not who we are as human beings. We need each other. We rely on each other, and we have relied on each other since human beings became human beings, right? Like this is tens of thousands of years of humanity, of humaning, right? One of the things I think we really there's two things I think we really have to recognize. And I think it started in 2020 with the pandemic. The first thing is that was the first global grief cycle since World War II. So the pandemic pushed us into this global grief cycle where there was not a human on the planet that wasn't experiencing some form of grief, whether they were grieving their loved ones dying, they were grieving their own health and near death potentially. They were grieving that they couldn't go and do the things that they wanted to do. They were grieving that they didn't have the opportunities that they wish they would have had, right? So we're grieving that some places violence got worse, that some places bodily autonomy got worse. Like we're grieving a whole lot of things, right? But the second thing is that we have to recognize, that I want us all to recognize, is people reacted into like toddlers that got put in a timeout. So we went into this global timeout, right? And half of the people, just like a 2-year-old, were like sitting in their seat and they were like futzing around. They're like, I didn't do anything wrong. And I went out of this chair and I don't know why you put me here. And I didn't do anything wrong. Right? Like the toddler who's like throwing a fit while they're in timeout. So they're just going to stay in timeout longer because they're having a cow. And then you had the other people who went into timeout and they're sitting in the chair, just like the other half of the 2-year-olds. And they're like, oh, I might have made a really bad choice. And I don't want to sit in this chair anymore. So I'm going to learn from this. And I'm going to go do something different because I got in trouble. And I don't like being in trouble. So I don't want to go in timeout anymore because I like playing with my toys. And so I'll be nicer to my brother because I don't want to be in timeout anymore. And that is exactly what we did as a collective globally. Right. And so the minute we honor that, then we can say to ourselves, oh, I can see that you were really freaked out, thinking that you had lost some sort of control that you thought you had, that you really didn't. And that must have been really scary for you.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if we all just looked at our enemies, right? Who are totally fabricated, by the way, and like
Yeah.
looked at them as people and we're like, wow, you must be really freaked out right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And it changes everything, first of all. Really does.
like the people who are legitimately afraid of immigrants, which I find to be fascinating. If we just looked at them and we're like, wow, It must be really interesting to be so afraid all the time.
Yep. It
Then
all stems
they
back to
have to
trauma.
do the reflection, right? And then they have to think about, well, am I really afraid or am I just told to be afraid? And I had this experience all the time in the LGBT community when I was living in Utah, right? Like I was a huge activist in the LGBT community. I actually was physically threatened because I was also the lobbyist for Planned Parenthood of Utah, so things happen, right? And there I did experience physical threats, verbal threats, all those things. And also, there were many times where I had to sit and go, well, do I really need to fear this person? Or am I just told that I'm supposed to be their enemy and fear them?
Hmm.
And that was when everything turned for me in my own career. When I was like, well, I don't really have to be afraid of you, dude.
Yeah.
Like I can see you with your anti-abortion legislation, and why don't we have a conversation about what you're so afraid of?
Fear is a powerful motivator.
And if we just started to acknowledge our fears, and okay, so here's a question I have for you. So I think we anthropomorphize fear. I think we have turned fear into an actual entity
Mm.
that doesn't have to be, that puts us in that fight or flight, freeze response for things that we legitimately don't need to fear. Because for many people, myself included, I have known what it's like to experience fear on a regular basis, daily basis. I've been
Mhm.
in violent situations. I grew up in a violent situation. I know how those things look. And I have built a life where I don't have to fear that I won't have food. I don't have to fear that I won't have shelter. I don't have to fear that the lights are going to get turned off. I get close sometimes. Sometimes there's not enough money to pay the damn power bill. And I go, what am I going to do? But I always have resources, right? I have resource. I've built a life full of that from a life that wasn't full of that. And
Yeah.
I wonder if we are anthropomorphizing fear and turning it into something that actually doesn't need to exist.
So, as somebody who works with parts of ourselves, my
Mhm.
immediate response is we all have a scared inner child. We all have a scared inner child that holds our emotion of fear. And when that part is not harmonized with our system, it'll red flag everything as a fear, right? It's like that part of us has lost discernment because of our traumatic experiences. So, as adults who have become re-empowered, we have to assure that scared inner child, like, and bring them up to speed that we're not in those situations anymore and we don't have to fear everything around us unless we are still in a situation, because I too unfortunately have been in all of the violent situations as well, right? So there are real situations where fear is warranted.
Absolutely.
But when we actually check in and we are actually secure, right? Like we look around, there's no tiger chasing us,
Mhm.
and we anchor in and there's still that fear. That's like a misfire, it's a misalignment. And I do believe in these like collective energy pools of belief,
Mm.
the shared dream, if you will, if you want to Don Miguel Ruiz, right? Like the shared dream that's really not a good dream, it's a nightmare. But we're collectively adding to that with our fear, our shame, our, expectations on others that they never agreed to. Like all of that is adding to that collective nightmare. So I do think that the biggest thing is this us versus them mentality that has been
Yes.
fabricated. And that's what we're always, as a collective, I personally like am a disruptor of this, but like as a collective, we're looking for the enemy. And I
Yes.
think that's become the program that's running is like,
Mhm.
who is my enemy? And I too, like, I'm LGBTQ. I've been at events and people didn't realize I was queer until they started talking to me. And then some little, word would come out and they'd realize, and the whole demeanor would shift
Yeah.
because suddenly I was the them that needed to be feared. Whereas
Right.
before I was a friendly person that they were super excited to be having a conversation with. And so
Mhm.
that's that switch. And we need to learn to stop letting that switch flip automatically. And that takes that like waking up, going, oh, huh. Right. Like I very openly talk about and this is like makes other white women really uncomfortable. I talk about how my racism switch got flipped when I was 9 and I moved to the South. I grew up in the North, I moved to the South, the switch got flipped, and then I went, huh, that's interesting. What's going on here? Why did I not see this view before and now I do see this view? And I had to unpack that. And that took a
Yeah.
while to unpack. It's uncomfortable as hell. But that's the kind of work we have to do to stop seeing people as others, as thems to be feared.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I do think there is this collective entity thing. You're totally, yeah.
I think it's so fascinating because I wonder when that really, I wonder if that's a holdover from World War II, even World War One. Like I really have been thinking a lot about collective grief, collective energy, and part of this is because I live with a veteran with PTSD, right?
Yeah.
And like, and I think about my grandpa who never, ever, ever talked about the war, and about, how really from I think this started at the end of World War One, but really at the end of World War Two, people were told to come home. Women left their jobs to go back into the home and create perfect lives for the soldiers without ever talking about anything.
Yeah.
They didn't even talk about what happened globally, right? And um I think that we are still, those of us that were born to those people are still really the reeling from the what the children of the soldiers who came home from World War One, we were born of those children, and we're still dealing with all of that.
Yeah.
And I just think there's so much for us to unravel and play with and weave into a different weaving. Like it's okay for us to pull the thread out and weave a different narrative.
Mm-hmm. We have to.
We have to. And
We
I feel
have to.
like what we're being pushed to do, like if we could just stop hating each other for 5 flipping minutes, yes, this is bad. And also, like my father-in-law just sent me the cutest message this morning. We don't agree politically about anything. But like, except for veterans, actually, we're on the same page about that. But like, he sent me the cutest message. He sends me the most random text messages. And like in the world, I have been trained to hate him. Right? Like in the external world, I'm supposed to hate him because he doesn't believe in my bodily autonomy. He has a really hard time with me, right? Like we have had our struggles and I adore him.
Yeah.
And he adores me, quite frankly. He doesn't know what to do with me. He's very confused about me. Right? Like one of the things he said is, he said to Jim, he's like, Missy's gonna go get her PhD and then she's gonna leave you. And Jim was like, I don't think she's using me and my 3 kids to go get a PhD. Like, I don't think that's what's happening. But like I could have really reacted quite poorly to that and held a grudge for however long I decided to. But like I don't. Like bless his heart, he's just like this old dude who doesn't think like I do politically, but loves me deeply because we figured out how to love each other. And it's like you said a little bit earlier, like we don't even know how to navigate differences in our families. And I'm like, as I'm raising these 3 human beings, I'm going, damn, none of you are like me. I mean, Sean's kind of like me, but like my baby. But like you really learn how people are individual when you raise human beings in the same house, and none of them are the same. None of them cope the same. You can't punish them the same. You can't reward them the same. You can't like teach them life lessons the same. And even with my husband, like I love this man. I don't know why I love this man sometimes, but I love him. But I started to realize that I was taking on his anxiety because I thought that's what a good partner did. And then I was like, oh, wait, none of this shit is mine.
Right.
I love you, buddy. Good luck.
That's that generational trauma of codependency.
Right. And if we start to address this collectively, and we really start to look at our shared humanity collectively, that us versus them binary way of thinking starts to shift into the both and. Well, I can disagree with you. I can both disagree with you and love you.
Yeah.
I have that own internal struggle with myself. Like, wow, Bird, you are really, what are you saying to yourself right now? Like, I can both hear this ridiculous narrative you have going on and love you for being all up in your ridiculous feelings right now.
That's
Like,
yeah.
self-talk is everything. And how are we talking to ourselves? I'm hearing a lot, I'm reading a lot, and I'm hearing a lot about how the answer to what is happening politically in the United States at the moment is love. And that love has to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to really look at how am I loving myself? Because it's really hard to love thy neighbor when I don't love myself. And we have to really start to think about, if the answer to what's happening right now in the United States is love, then we have got to release the judgment of ourselves and love ourselves more deeply.
Yes.
And man, that is the work. That is the daily work for me. Like,
Yes.
oh girl, look at you and all your human messiness. You
Yes.
gorgeous creature. You powerhouse of awesome. Look at how you're talking to yourself right now, you big goober. When the self-talk goes bad, it goes real bad.
Yeah, the spiral gets going quickly. It really does. And I love this. This is like a core message I've been sharing lately. Everywhere is this: the work starts within. You got to learn to love yourself, because yes, you're not going to love anyone out there if you have issues with yourself. You're going to love the parts of the other people that you see yourself in,
Mhm.
the parts that you like. And the
Yeah.
rest is going to be like nails on a chalkboard. And that's your invitation to go, what do I need to work on in me that's coming up in them? I'm
Yeah.
seeing myself mirrored. Yes. Oh my gosh. We need to talk sometime, by the way, about biological numbers, because that is the explanation for why households are so different, because they don't repeat in families. That would be a whole hour long conversation. So we'll get into that another time. But as we are winding down here, I do want to hear a little bit more about your Substack. You are always like, you're on top of sharing your perspectives, your wisdom, your healing with as many people as you can. And I understand Substack is kind of like your go-to. That's where you're really putting the juicy stuff out right now. So tell me more.
Yeah, so I decided, I got both my knees replaced last summer, and I decided to go off social media when I did that. And it's been beautiful. And one of the things I decided was that I I wanted all of my beautiful words. I'm a writer. I wanted all my beautiful words to be someplace where I could get, thanks. Huh, my Substack is amazing. Um, where I could inspire people, get paid for my writing, inspire people, and really give people connective language from spirit. And so I do a Monday sermon, and then and when you become a subscriber to my Substack, you actually get my voice. So I
Oh,
read my book.
nice.
So I do a Monday sermon. I call them I've started calling them sermonettes because that sounds kind of fun. But like, they're these little juicy tidbits of spiritual guidance. Sometimes I talk about the Bible. Sometimes I talk about other spiritual texts, but mostly it's just there to really help us anchor into a deeper, more grounded spiritual positioning, so that we can really face the unknown and go into wherever the heck we're going next. And then I do a channel message on Wednesdays, and then on Fridays I do a love note. And for people who aren't paid subscribers, they get a free love note once a month, and all the channel messages are free. So that's what I do on my Substack, and I love it there. Like, when I get on there to write, I'm like, oh, that's so fun. It's so beautiful.
Well, it's because you're really sharing, like, you're not afraid to share the truth. You're not afraid to share, the realness on there. And that is like so essential to relatable writing.
Yeah.
We could have a whole conversation there too, but
I just love it there. There is something so gorgeous about what's happening for me personally over there too. Like, I love that I get to share love this way. It's just so rich and beautiful and amazing.
Well, I am so glad you're doing what you're doing and that you're changing the paradigms and you are doing the radical deep work. Like that's what's needed right now. And again, yes, you are a hell of a powerhouse of a voice and making waves in the best of ways. So, thank you for all that you do. Again, drmelissabird.com is your URL. Is your Substack linked on your site? Okay,
Yep.
so you want to get on that Substack, go check out Dr. Bird's website and get and connect. Like I'm so glad we're connected. I'm so glad that we met through the Passionistas. Shout out to the Passionistas community as well. Uh, we're here to hold space and be a community together. And that's what I love that Dr. Bird and I have in common is like this real relating. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share today before we wrap up?
I just really want to encourage everyone when you get freaked out, when you think, "Oh my god, what are we going to do?" Just take a nice big deep breath and feel the ground. Know that you are connected to the earth and the earth is taking care of us just fine, even though we might not like what she's doing.
And on that note, friends, I will see you back here again for another Shadow Side episode soon. Dr. Bird, it is a pleasure as always. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for sharing space with me, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Oh, I hope so.
All right, goodbye,